All right, so let's get into some shading techniques. So the first thing I'm going to do is just add a light wash of tone. I'm using a number 2 pencil. This is just a mechanical pencil. So we're just going to add a very light wash. Very, very light wash. I even have an H pencil actually. I have an H on hand. So an H is much softer than, or sorry, I think it's much harder than a number 2 pencil. See that? See how you can barely see any of the marks? But also, it adds a much lighter tone. And with graphite, you really want to build your values. Build your values. And now with the B pencil, I'm going to be shading in another layer to the cast shadow. Just a simple little layer here. Building up the layers. I'm going to do the same thing with these shadows here. Now remember, if you want to know exactly what materials I'm using, you can always scroll down to the description box below, and all of that information will be typed up for you. And that is in terms of what paper I'm using, what pencils, erasers. I actually don't know what pencil this is, to be honest. It says Skill-Craft, but that's all I know. It's just a mechanical pencil. It's my favorite pencil, in fact. So let's shade this in even more. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is think about the face as kind of a 3-dimensional structure now, turning in space. So as opposed to going in and micro shading each and every feature, I'm going to go ahead and look at the large picture. So let's go ahead and put in our first, what we're going to call plane change. And those of you that have been watching my videos for a long time know what a plane change is. A plane on its own is basically what this paper is. It's just a 3-dimensional sheet in space, and so a plane on the portrait will be exactly this. So we're shading this in. And if you want to see how this drawing was constructed, the first layer of this drawing, at least we're going to call them layers, you can go ahead and scroll down to the description box below, and I have a link to how this drawing was started. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in this little plane, simple little plane change here. So a plane change is indicated by a value change. So again, I'm going to go ahead and look at the shape of the globella here, and this is going to be another plane change, turning away from the light. And while I'm doing this, I'm starting to notice that this eyebrow, her eyebrow actually comes up a little bit. A little bit more than I had before. A little bit more than I established before. And with my kneaded eraser, I'm just going to go ahead and subtract this shape here. So her eyebrow does come up a little bit. Okay, so now the next plane change to look at is right here. So this is going to be the plane change for the orbicularis oris region. So this is actually just going to come down about here. So this is another plane change here. One plane here, another plane here for the bottom of the orbicularis oris. And as we keep adding more and more values into the light, we're going to want to add more washes of value into the shadow. We don't want anything in the shadow to be confused with anything in the light, but if it happens, it happens. Let's just make sure that we, at least in our minds, know the difference between the areas in light and the areas in shadow. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and think about the curvature of the portrait. Actually, before that, nope, I'm forgetting this plane change here for the forehead. But you know what, as I'm doing this, let's go ahead and think about the curvature of the forehead. And we're going to relate that to the whole portrait now. So the curvature of the forehead, not a cylinder, but think about it kind of like a cylinder curving around like this, but it has a flat sheet here. That's why I started out with the planes first before getting into what we're going to do now. So now we're going to think about the head as just curving in space, kind of like an egg, turning around like an egg. So starting out from the terminator line being the line right here that terminates light and shadow, we're going to go ahead and start to make it darker as we emerge from the shadow, and progressively lighter as we move away from the shadow. See that? And we're applying this wash on the entire drawing. And again, these are just shading techniques. Go ahead and comment down below on what your favorite technique is when you're shading with graphite. And we can't see it on the photo reference, but as we turn away, this area here is actually going to get a little bit darker because it's turning away from the light. And we're thinking about the whole head, not just one individual part, the entire head. Don't worry, we'll get to the parts. I know you want to see how we carefully shade in an eye and a nose and all that stuff, but we want to think about the large structure of the head first. Again, we're going to revisit the shadow. Let's see if I have this is a 5B. I'm actually going to sharpen it a little bit. I usually like to do my block-ins with just a mechanical pencil so I don't have to sharpen because I'm kind of lazy. But yeah, this is why I don't like to sharpen pencils, just because that happens. And again, this is a real life stuff that I deal with. So I'm going to go into my little arsenal of pencils. Nope, don't have any other pencils, unfortunately. So let's just go ahead and press down a little bit harder with the B pencil. Gotta be careful not to lose the distinction between light and shadow here. And again, this is a preliminary drawing for a painting. So this drawing is going to be used for a painting. So I want to get as much information as I can out of the drawing so that it facilitates the painting. So let's just make sure that these boundaries between light and shadow are not lost. So I'm going to just keep solidifying the light and shadow shapes, just the simple shapes of light and dark. And then we're going to get into the individual features and make them more and more dimensional. So again, I'm just making a very solid and finite distinction between light and shadow. Just like we did when we blocked in this portrait. Just pressing down even harder now. And if you recall, if you watched the block-in portion of this video, I had a lot of trouble with this distance here. So got to make sure that these distances communicate with one another. Sorry, let's push this back here. So the tear duct to the back of the eye has to communicate with this shape here. So now this eye is starting to grow. So we have to be very careful not to grow any of the features too much when shading. That's one thing we want to watch out for when we're shading in a drawing. It's a tendency that we all have to grow the features accidentally. So again, just pressing down much harder now. Let's put in a little dark shape here for the hair. And I'm not going to do too much for the hair since this is a drawing that I want to transfer for a painting, so not going to focus too much on that. See how I'm kind of going back and forth into the termination between light and shadow. That's a little mark here that I didn't have before. And when I draw in the shape for the cast shadow, especially the side plane of the face, I work in this kind of fashion, kind of making marks following the direction of the form, kind of like if a sculptor were to be kind of mushing this shape out of a block of clay. Now let's go ahead and reestablish the shape here for the lower lip. And if you haven't seen the video on how I wrestled with the proportions of this drawing, do go and watch it, because most of what's going into this couldn't and would not be possible without spending as much time as I could with the block-in stage. So again, using straight lines and angles here to make sure that the light and shadow delineations are not lost. So let's look here. Back side of the nose. Now let's make sure that the root of the nose, the bottom of the nose, see this point here? Just make sure that if we drop a vertical, it lands right here on the top middle portion of the mouth. And this also has to communicate with this tear duct. These are relationships that we established in the block-in. And again, let's remember that the purpose or the goal is to take in visual information and through interpretation, create a drawing. It's not about creating a perfectly photographic rendition of the model. It never is. So we're adding in a little tone there for the lips. Let's go ahead and put in a little angle here for the eyes, or for the eye. Straight lines and angles. Now here's the back side of the upper eyelid. Turns into a dark shape here. This shape goes up. Again, that has to go up a little more. Tear duct. Upper eyelid, wrapping in towards the tear duct there. Dark shape for the lower eyelid. See how we're working all around. Once we have all of our light and shadow shapes very finely solidified, we'll get into each individual feature. Okay, so now for the mouth, I gotta make sure that this angle here relates properly with all these features, which it does. Let's hope it does. Not the end of the world if it doesn't. Remember, I always say keep your shapes simple and easy for you to understand. And of course, you know the rest. Keep your shapes simple and easy for you to understand. So when the time comes to make any changes, those changes will be simple and easy to manage. Little shape here for the chin. I'm going to shade this in a little more. All right, now we're going to go into each individual little feature and render them. So I have, remember my sharpener. My sharpener is kind of evil, so I'm going to say no to pencil sharpeners and yes to razor blades. So razor blade and sandpaper. Razor blade and sandpaper equals sharpened pencils. I know it's kind of caveman, but you know, I'm trying to sharpen my pencils. So I'm going to be working with an H and a 5B, as well as my mechanical pencil that is a B. So the first thing I want to do is with my 5B, I'm going to go ahead and add in some darker tones now. So this is going to be for the iris, and in particular the pupil, the dark shape of the pupil. I'm just going to make sure that my darks are well established. And again, I'm pretty much still layering onto the painting. Sorry, the painting, really. I'm layering onto the drawing. And I'm going to have a little piece of paper towel, and I'm going to go and kind of tap onto this value. And remember, this is a preparatory drawing that I'm going to transfer, so I'm kind of eager to get to the painting. That's why you might hear me confuse drawing and painting a lot. So let's go ahead and push this dark shape now. Now we're going to firmly establish the dark shape here for the eyelid. And you know what? There's a little cast shadow here right on the eyelid. Wow. I didn't notice that before. Interesting. So I'm going to go back to the B, the mechanical pencil. Just shade that in. And I think I went over. So I'm going to go back to the kneaded eraser and fix that little shape there. No problem. Back to the 5B. There we go. Now, just like the block-in, the shading can also take quite some time. So I'm not sure if I'm going to split this video up. I don't know. I might split this into just how to shade each individual feature. We'll see. I'm making the dark of the upper eyebrow a little bit more prominent. Going to switch to the B and add another layer into the cast shadow. Kind of trying to fill in the grain of the paper now with the shading, just so it appears a little more smooth. Now I'm going to switch to the H, and I'm going to put in this little dark shape for the lower eyelid. I think this is referred to as the tear bag. Not entirely sure. I got that from this artist Scott Waddell. I really like his videos. He has lots of instructional videos that he sells, light years ahead of where I am in terms of his knowledge. So anyway, he refers to this area as the tear bag. At least I hope that is. That's what I remember. I'm going to shade this in here. Now with the kneaded eraser, I'm going to go ahead and subtract a little bit of light here. Now, just like the block-in, the shading is very back and forth-ish. Very back and forth-ish. But I'm going to be providing you with as much footage as I possibly can in this process. So I'm going to sharpen my 5B a little bit. And remember, the way I sharpen it is just kind of turning and turning and turning with the sandpaper. Hopefully you got that. Hopefully I got that on camera. Or was I? Oh, the bottom shape here. This is the little shape for the eyelash. And this is all part of my preferred painting process. So I really enjoy creating a transfer drawing that is a little more developed to facilitate my paintings. And remember, drawing is the foundation of all good and evil with painting. Now we're starting to shade in this shape here for the eye socket. Gets darker as it turns away from the light, lighter as it turns closer to the light. I'm trying to make my marks kind of in the direction of the form. Now with graphite, the important thing to understand is that graphite usually can't get as dark as charcoal. So, but the other advantage to graphite is that you don't really have to spray fixative on it like you do with charcoal drawings, thus making it much easier to transfer your drawings. Not always the case. I mean, you can always transfer with charcoal. I just like transferring graphite drawings. So it's going to get a little darker here on the corner of the sclera. The sclera, think about the eye as a ball, and the ball is like turning in space. And again, a good person to look to for that kind of information is Scott Waddell. Dark shape here for the upper eyelid. Little dark shape there for the tear duct. The more information I can extract out of a drawing, the much better equipped my painting will be. So we have a little bit of light there for the tear duct. And it's actually going to get a little darker down here towards the bottom of the tear bag. And then lighter as it turns towards the lower eyelid. And with I'm using the H for these subtle shifts of tone. This, in fact, needs to get a little bit darker. A little bit softer of a gradation here. And there's even a little darker tone here. As the eyelid, or sorry, the lower eyelid starts to turn away from the light, it's getting darker. And then I keep seeing much more of a dark here for the lower eyelid. Much more dark. And then this actually is going to get darker too. Again, remember I said this is very back and forth-ish. And as my focus starts to increase, I may start to speak a little less. Switch to the 5B now. Back to the H. That eyebrow, I raised it a little bit. I still think it needed to raise a little bit, but this shape here her eyebrows aren't that thick, I don't think. I don't know. Let's just try to cut that in a little bit. I think that helps. Switching to the 5B. Nope, gotta sharpen it. So I'm just sharpening my 5B again with the sandpaper. Gonna go ahead and put another dark shape in here. Notice how the layers keep building. And with graphite, you really want to build the layers. And I'm just knocking some of the excess graphite off with paper towel. And hey, if you are curious as to what my favorite paper towel is, it is a Viva brand, V-I-V-A, and no one's paying me to tell you this, so you know that I'm giving you the absolute truth. And even if they did pay me, I would still give you the absolute truth. A little bit darker here now, around the corner of the iris. I'm going to switch to the H. There's a little bit of light here on the bottom of the iris. See, now even the iris is being subdivided in terms of shapes of light and shapes of dark. Now this is going to get a little bit tricky here. I think that this shape here needs to be a little different. So with the H, let's go ahead and see that I was missing a little triangle of light here. Super tiny. Yet still evident. Now with the H, I'm just softening some of these edges. And with the H, there's still a little bit of her lower eyelash. Now when I transfer this drawing for the painting, I'm not going to transfer every little detail. Obviously, I'm not going to transfer eyelashes and stuff. But what I'm going to transfer is the just the basic block in. But the reason I'm gathering all this information for the drawing is one, because I like drawing, and two, because it's going to help me with the painting. So that is, whatever I struggle with in the drawing, I'm going to take note of that for the painting and try not to struggle with that too much. Or at least know that I'm going to struggle with it a little bit with the painting. A little bit darker here. And now you're really getting an idea of how much time I spend studying each individual feature. It gets a little bit darker still. So I just, with the 5B, I put in another dark pass there. Now I'm going to shade out of it with the H. Now I'm going to take the H pencil and just shade my way over to the other eye. So this is the glabella, and it's getting a little bit darker down here as we progress further away from the light. Much darker over here. At this point, it's going to be pretty important to have a fairly sharp point to the pencil. I'm kind of filling in these little, kind of the little gaps of the paper, the texture of the paper. And now it's getting darker, even darker as we approach the shadow. So now we've just about made our way over to the other eye. So I'm going to switch back to the B pencil, just to shade a little more into the shadow here. I'm just darkening this area right now. This is the concavity of the eye socket. Now we're going to go ahead and apply another wash right underneath the eyebrow. Remember, that's just my paper towel. Alright, so now I'm going to switch back to the 5B. Gonna put in the dark for the eyebrow. Pretty dark over here. But I'm not trying to put all my force, all the force of my arm into the paper. Just slowly letting the layers build. I'm going to switch back to the H, and let's go ahead and just try to layer in some more graphite into the shadow. Switching back and forth between pretty much each pencil. I'm just trying to get a nice uniform tone. Now I'm back to the 5B. Back to the H. a little darker shape right here. Back to the 5B. Now we're going to go ahead and reassess this dark shape here for the tear duct. That seems about all right, though there is an angle here that I want to describe. The angle that we indicated in the block in. So let's actually push this down a little bit. Now we're going to move our way towards the iris. Add a little more dark. Now we're going to put in the dark for the pupil. Now it appears to me that the pupil might be getting, or sorry, the iris might be getting a little too big on this side. So let's go ahead and subtract a little bit here just by lightly tapping the kneaded eraser. Back to the 5H, sorry, the 5B. We're going to push that shape in a little bit. That looks a little closer, but let's move it just a little more. Now I'm going to switch back to the H. And remember, we're going to treat the sclera like a sphere. So over here it's going to get darker, then lighter as we turn towards the light. Back to the 5B. Gonna make this shape even darker. So it's going to be pretty dark here near the back of the eyelid, or the back side of the curve of the upper eyelid. Going to switch back to the H, just to fill in a little bit of graphite here. So the H is pretty good at filling in the little gaps left behind by the 5B. Now, I think I still need a little more curvature here for the iris. Now the other eye is starting to take form a little bit. And of course it's going to get darker even here as it turns away from the light. I'm going to switch back to the B and just shade this in a little bit more. And here we have a little bit of dark. I'm going to switch back to the 5B for that. Now this is the dark for the lower eyelashes. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on eyelashes. It's just not my style. Back to the H. Gonna make this even darker. Now there is a little glimpse of light here on the top side of the lower eyelid. Switching back to the H. A little bit of a darker plane right here. And then here we have the lower tear bag. It's going to get a little darker down here and then lighter as we approach the lower eyelid. Very subtle stuff here. Going to switch back to the 5H. I keep saying it, 5H, excuse me. The 5B. Add another layer of dark to the upper eyelid. Man, I'm getting my features confused. See, this is what happens when I'm very focused. I'm sure a lot of you may know the feeling when you're focused on a drawing or a painting. It's like everything else in the world kind of seems to vanish. Back to the 5B. Tell you what, at this point, I'm very focused on these shapes. So rather than cut the footage and kind of jump to the next scene, I'm going to keep shading in here, but I'm not going to talk as much. All right, I'm going to talk again. So the eyes, I just want to make sure that they're the same size in terms of their height. And it looks about good. The only thing that's bothering me probably is this distance here from the upper eyelid to the upper eyebrow. May need a little more distance there, but I don't want to lose this angle. So, I don't know. See, drawing is all about problem solving. That's what I really want you to get out of this. all about problem solving. And you may say that I'm really slow, but hey, I'm trying to give you the full experience for those of you that are interested. I hope this will help some of you out, being able to see me struggle through a drawing. Hopefully this will let you know that it's okay to struggle. That's part of it. It's part of the learning process. Everyone struggles. I'm pretty sure Rembrandt struggled too. Caravaggio, Sargent. Pretty sure all of them had some difficulties with their work as well. Okay, so now that looks a little better. I just moved the upper eyebrow up such a tiny bit, super tiny. Unimaginably tiny bit. I don't even think that's a millimeter. But that's really the observation coming into play. The fact that I can even notice something that small. I once heard that that a portrait is the story of how a bunch of little things either made your day or ruined your day. So now we're paying attention to the little things just as much as the big things. And again, I'm going to put another pass of dark into here. So this is a little more dark to the pupil. And we can barely see the pupil in the image. So let's go ahead and darken all around it. And then after applying that value, again, I noticed, gotta keep shrinking this. So just lightly tapping with the kneaded eraser. I'm gonna switch back to the H just to fill in some of the spots that I took out. Gonna go back in with the 5B. Looks a little better. Again, even darker over here. Back to the 5B. We're going to push this value even darker. Switching to the H. I'll go ahead and soften this little edge here. And I'm starting to notice that this entire value can actually get a little darker. And down here as well. Another little wash of dark. And now the values are really starting to sing. Or scream. Hopefully they're singing. So I'm layering over it again with the B.